Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Flenchball, host of Factory Talk in partnership with Industry Week, and here with Ashleigh Walters for another episode of Factory Talk.
Factory Talk, Secrets of Effective Plant Leaders, produced by
So welcome to the show, Ashleigh. Love to hear about you, your background, and your company. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jamie. I am a small town girl from Riceville, Tennessee, and I grew up in a multi-generational manufacturing family. So manufacturing is near and dear to my heart. I'm currently the president of Onex Incorporated here in Erie, Pennsylvania. We serve clients who have industrial furnaces. So we maintain their equipment as well as build brand new equipment. Heavily tied to aerospace, defense, and oil and gas forgings in the area.
Yeah, that's a strong, Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, foundational industry from that standpoint. So I'm from a fairly small town myself, but Pennsylvania born, Pennsylvania resident. So always love to see fellow Pennsylvania manufacturing efforts taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. Manufacturing is the heartbeat of our small towns for sure.
Absolutely, and Erie has a long history from that regard. What's your favorite thing about Erie?
Well, the lake is beautiful. Most people don't realize how big it is, right? It is the size of an ocean. And it's always funny when my parents come to visit, my mom always waits for the tide. There is no tide. Right. We also don't have salt or sharks.
Right. I also used to live in Michigan, so we go visit Lake Michigan, and same situation there, but still very enjoyable, and a lot of the good things of a big body of water that come along with that. Also lake effect snow in the winter, but
yeah, the 200 plus inches of snow I could do without.
Yeah, that's I don't think not many people choose that.
No.
part of living in the area. So
for sure.
So you've been in the organization, leading it for a long time, and I know have a personal passion for culture and leading people. So why don't we start there and tell me a bit about what do you do to personally affect your company's culture?
So I'll take you back just a little bit. So when I got out of Auburn University with my chemical engineering degree, my dad said to me, "That's great, but you don't know much." And I thought that was pretty tough advice, right? The get-go. I felt like I'd done a lot of work, to obtain that engineering degree. But what he meant was he had always spent his career on a manufacturing floor. And he, as he called them affectionately, the white hats management team did not listen to their frontline employees in this organization. And so the best advice I've ever received was to go to the people who are actually doing the work, because he said they already have the solution to the problem that you're solving. So that really is how I manage and lead an organization, and that's our true culture. In 2013, when my father-in-law asked me to lead the company, there was a leader here previous to me that was very command and control. Do what I say, when I say to do it, don't ask me any questions. But when I came aboard, I didn't know how we were doing and what we were doing, and I needed to ask all those super curious questions. So I did literally take Dad's advice, and I went to the plant floor and just started asking questions about how we do things. But the one thing I did that really made a difference was I asked people, what frustrates you the most? What takes up the most of your time? And they would tell me, and I would say, okay, let's work to solve it. Let's work to get that waste out of our organization. And that was really how we built that trust and respect back. And if you've ever been in a relationship where trust has been broken, you know how long it takes to repair that. So it's a little bit of my philosophy on how to lead.
Oh, that's great. I love the frontline engagement, and so I'm curious. Did you have some experimentation that led to that kind of core question of what frustrates you the most? Because I do find a lot of leaders kind of have, here's the question I always start with, or I keep going back to, or what, it's, and it's almost always different, or so at least variations on a theme. So did it take you a while to land on that question, or did you have early success with it and just kept going back to it? What about what frustrates you resonates with you and your effectiveness?
So I think we just had an organization that was very frustrated at that point in time. They've been led through fear. They didn't know what all was going on. They've been very siloed in their own departments. So that what frustrates you opened the door for them to just spill their guts on me if they so chose, right? There was a lot that frustrated them. But to your point, there are variations of that one. And so another one that we've used in more recent history is from Paul Akers in his 2-second lean. He says, what bugs you?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that we have come from the what frustrates you land to the what bugs you land, just trying to find those inefficiencies and wastes in the organization.
No, it's a neat evolution. And yeah, it takes a bit of patience. If nobody's asked how people are doing, and you're the first one and they have a chance to unload, you have to get through that in order
Yes.
to, if you're ever going to ask the question a second time, right? So takes some patience to get through all of that and kind of get over the hump from a cultural standpoint to get where you want to go.
And that's a really good point. You have to do something with the information that they just gave you, because if you don't do anything with it, then they won't tell you again in the future.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of leaders hesitate, because they can't do something about everything they hear, right?
Yes.
And so they don't want to end up with a request that they can't deliver on. But if you listen enough, there's got to be something you can do in there.
Yeah, and that's a great example. So I told you we were involved in aerospace. Well, anybody that knows anything about aerospace, that you cannot change something in the aerospace like supply chain, right? Oh, and if you do, it takes a lot of testing to get it through. And so one of the ideas that came up was a way to produce a part differently. But I explained we can't make that change without a very rigorous process, to make the change for the client. And so while it looks like it would save a ton of time and money up front, it would actually cost money for that client to make that change. So I also think as long as you say we can't do it because, or maybe we can't do it right now, but keep thinking of those great ideas, like they'll continue to come. I think people just want to know that they were heard.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always have to implement their idea.
No, I think that's an excellent point. I think the why, the context of why, a no with why,
Yes.
The whole parenting, do something why, well, because I said so. It doesn't do a lot to build trust that we want in an organization. So
No.
going back to your points around command and control. So with daily, daily production needs, daily schedules and everything else, especially in a smaller manufacturing company, really hard to create room and space for development of people. So what do you do to make that happen?
So I think first and foremost, we had to teach problem solving skills. So back to command and control. These people have been told to do everything, right? And so they kind of no longer think for themselves. They no longer take that risk to go try out to solve a problem or experiment. So just learning and teaching problem solving skills was number one for us. And then that created a culture here of continuous improvement. It kind of, you start to get like a buzz, right, about continuous improvement. And so it just kind of fed itself from there. I'll also say that in these smaller companies, we're not always trained to be leaders. We were the ones that were doing our job best and got promoted into managing others, which is not necessarily always the best choice. So a lot of leadership training to develop our people. But the other thing, it is a daily demand for production, especially now with supply chain issues and labor shortages. And so we find that a coach approach, when we're having conversations right in the moment when things are happening is like the best way for us to move forward and be agile. We're not sticking a note in a file and waiting for a performance review annually before we address something. We're just trying to address it as we're moving through the day.
That's great. So obviously, as a author of People Solve Problems, problem solving is pretty pretty important to me, pretty near and dear to my heart. So how did you go about teaching problem solving skills to people? Was it on the fly? Did you put people through a course? Did you focus on tools and methods, or how did you go about taking on that challenge?
So the way that we taught it was, it started out with kata, and it started out very basic kata. And we had a coach who came and worked with us, so that, you know, when you're learning a new skill, if you don't keep up with it, if you don't do it for 21 days or however long, you know, if you don't make it a part of your processes, then it doesn't become a part of the culture. It doesn't become ingrained. And so that coaching effort with kata was really helpful. We did it on our production floor, but we also did it in our offices. And then what we found, that we did all this training right up before COVID, and then COVID hit. And so we're in the midst of a crisis, and we kind of lose our way a little bit, right? So when you fall off the diet plan, then you have to get back on. So now that the crisis has been averted somewhat, we can get back to those really good habits that we had prior to.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think people's sort of cultural transformations during the pandemic, I think the most successful probably held steady. You know, some probably continued to advance, some held steady, and those were successes. I'll say even slipping back only a little was a success. Some completely dropped and have to start from zero, and that's a tougher thing. So you talked earlier about building a continuous improvement culture. So culture has always been pretty important to me. I've written about, spoken about it, taught it for years. So what behaviors do you find most important that help illustrate or demonstrate the culture that you're looking for?
Yeah, so you might laugh at me, but I think it's pretty simple for us. Work hard, be kind, stay humble. And I think if you do all those things, you build that trust and respect in an organization with your peers, and that leads to pride and loyalty in your work. But it's not a huge, big, fancy formula.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be. I think those are great. So do you have any examples of how those, work hard, be kind, stay humble, how any of those show up in your organization? Maybe one of those aha moments where you're like, the culture's catching on.
Yes, I have a great one for you, Jamie. So during COVID, as everything's going down, right? And there's all shades of gray that we're trying to deal with as manufacturers. We were deemed an essential manufacturer. So we did send our personnel off-site that could work remotely, but then we had our production personnel still here at the plant. But immediately, the plant was closed down. Only the people that worked for Onex could come in. We only had half the management team here at one time. We were doing everything we could to keep everybody healthy and safe. And my shipping and receiving manager came to me one day and he said, Ashleigh, what do we do about the truck drivers? And I said, what do we do about the truck drivers? I said, they just need to stay in their truck. We don't, know where they've been. We can't contact trace, all these good things. And he said, they usually come into the plant to use the facilities. And I said, well, I'm sorry, they're just going to have to go somewhere else. And he said, there's nowhere else to go. The gas stations are closed. The rest areas have been closed. And I thought, oh, you're right. There is nowhere else for them to go. And so we did not need the women's restroom on the plant floor at that time because most of the women were out of the facility. And so we turned that into the truck driver's restroom. And then Nate went as far as to set up a table with water bottles and snacks for them to grab as they exited the building, and hand wipes and hand sanitizer and all those good things. But I thought, man, that's our culture in place. That's that be kind part that I missed. I didn't even know that the truck drivers were coming into the building to use the facilities. But to me, that's what a leader wants, is for everybody to live those values.
Yeah, that's a great example, and really does demonstrate both your empowerment and listening to your folks on the front line, but also the culture that you're trying to build. So that's a really great story. So let's talk a bit about goals. You talked about some of the things that you've put into place. Some 2-second lean, some kata, some I love when people sort of build their own models that work for them. So what do you do about goal setting for your organization, and how does that impact your continuous improvement efforts?
So I took that one a little bit differently too. When we first started our board of directors, it was the cascaded goals through the organization, right? I got 5 big projects, and then those 5 projects had 5 sub goals, kind of a roadmap on how I was supposed to complete them, and then I needed to roll those all through the organization. And in 2018, as we started preparing for, or I'm sorry, 2017, as we started preparing for the next year, I just did a gut check and I said, this takes so much time and resources to do these annual performance reviews. And to what end? We're looking in the rearview mirror instead of out the windshield. And so I took a different approach to it, and I just started using the WIG model, the wildly important goals. And so in 2018, I said, we have one goal that we have to meet. We have to grow revenue. And so everyone in the organization gave me a 1-page synopsis of what they were going to do to help us meet our goal. So instead of cascading down, we went bottoms up, because once again, these people are sitting the closest to the work. They already have the solution to the problem. They know what they can do to help and be impactful. And so each year I've used that same model. It's been hugely successful for us. So revenue was the first year, debt reduction the second year, succession planning. Then we did earnings per share because we became an employee-owned company. So we started teaching everybody about the business. And then this year it's customer experience, both internal and external. And so what we've found is we've never lost sight of revenue growth or debt reduction. We've just built upon the good habits that we had.
Yeah, those are great examples and great goals. I think a lot of people treat direct and empower as antonyms, or words that don't belong together. But this is an example of how they do belong together, right? So you're providing the direction by selecting the wildly important goal, but empowering to achieve it, right? Through these 1-page notes around here's what I'm going to do to achieve it. And direct and empower go together. They aren't separate from each other, and you're demonstrating that.
Yeah, and you're not writing the roadmap for people. I don't know about you, but I don't love being told what to do. I'd rather be given a goal, and there's fun in trying to figure out how to accomplish it on my own, instead of somebody giving me the roadmap to make that happen. I also think, a lot of leaders say, well, how do we hold them accountable? How do we hold them responsible for this? Well, if they set their own goal, if they want to meet it, they will hold themselves accountable. It kind of takes that piece out of your hands. They'll be excited to do it.
Awesome. So this will I probably can guess the answer based on how you've described the rest of your leadership, but maybe just elaborate more on continuous improvement. How do you drive that? How do you maintain some consistency from the top? Is it more bottoms up? How do you make sure that continuous improvement is happening? How do you describe all of that from your perspective?
Yeah, so it's definitely bottoms up. We have employed a lot of different tools, Jimmy, and I think it just depends upon where we are in kind of our life cycle as a company, like which tool makes the most sense for us. So value stream mapping was one of the very first ones we used, and it was awesome to get conversations started across these teams and get them collaborating where they weren't allowed to have a conversation before. So we did it at the production level, and then we also did it in our offices as we implemented a new accounting system. But then after we got those conversations started, we figured out we needed to 5S the place. I mean, we had just junk in every corner. And so just cleaning things up made us feel better. And then it was on to the kata process, right? So now we've kind of caught the continuous improvement bug, and now we're going to learn how to solve more problems and go a little bit deeper. But we've also circled back, especially on the 5S. So we lost our way here in COVID. Things had gotten out of control again. And just one day, all of us were like, just stop what we're doing and get this back in order again. It feels so much better. But I will say it has to start with the leader. The leader has to believe in continuous improvement and understand and value its importance and live by those examples too. So I took a picture of a closet that's in my office. We use it for our, merchandise, swag, whatever you want to call it. And it had gotten completely out of control. And there were boxes piled up beside the closet that didn't fit in the closet. And so I took a picture of that and I shared it with the organization, and then I cleaned it all up and I shared that picture too. So I can admit when I need to clean up. And so it helps, right? When your leader says, okay, this has gotten out of control. I'm participating. Let me, make things better.
That's great. I don't always live that particular one. And I do clear out books. I've probably donated 15 milk crates worth of books over the years, but I did get rid of an old desk, and I cleared out all the drawers of the desk before I was getting rid of it, and found stuff that had been there for almost 20 years, clearly hadn't been needed. It's easy how much those little things can get out of control. And I always say doors and drawers are meant to hide clutter, not keep things neat. So that's an interesting tool journey. Value stream mapping to 5S to Kata. Are there other tools that that you've either sort of emerged from your own efforts, or that you've stumbled upon and tried, or even tools that you've tried, didn't work, and you just sort of threw them away and say that's not right for us?
Well, going back to 2-second lean, we have implemented some of Paul Akers' 2-second lean, but we're certainly not world class like there are companies out there. And going through that journey, it has definitely been one of experimentation. So we started with shadow boards in our production facility when we were talking about the wet bugs, and then we found that shadow boards didn't work because the tools were in one place, but the parts weren't in the place always that the tools were. So we found that toolboxes were actually better because you could take the tools to the place where the work was happening. So I guess that would be one example of like shadow boards didn't work very well just because of the job shop nature of our business and the different parts being in different places.
Yeah, I certainly have seen that particular example many times, where it's like the problem isn't at the end of the shift when we put everything away. The problem is when we're using it, and those are two different places. So
yes.
let's 5S the use, not the storage, from that standpoint. So this is a great story. So just to wrap up, in terms of people following you, following your company, they want to get in touch, maybe learn more about what you're doing. How can they find you or your company?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is absolutely the best way to find me. Reach out anytime. The company also posts quite frequently on LinkedIn, but our website is onexinc.com, onexinc.com. And we've got some great resources out there for leaders, different podcasts that we've been on, media that we've produced, and even worksheets for your individual growth or your team.
That's fantastic. It's pretty unusual for a smaller, especially privately held company to share in that kind of way, mostly because they're too busy just keeping the lights on and keeping the machinery running. So I love that you and your company share so openly. I think that's a great example.
I think you're right. It's not historically been something manufacturers do very well. If asked how the business is going, it's always great, right? There's never any expansion on that. But no, we just wanted to pay it forward. I've led through 2 crises now, one internal and one external, and just hope that something that we're doing, somebody else will find helpful in their journey.
That's a great spirit and very consistent with the spirit of continuous improvement. So thank you for coming on here and being one example of you sharing openly with others that want to learn. So I really appreciate the conversation, the stories, and the lessons from you and your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Jamie.
Fantastic.